You want a man to fall in love with you, and I mean chase you, focus only on you, and delete all the other women from his phone, then you need to identify the limiting love stories that are going on in your mind. Because 90% of people, they're walking around with beliefs that are actively sabotaging not just their love life, their entire life. So let's go into how we can diagnose, hey, what limiting love stories are going on. So I'll show you the exact process that I use with my clients to spot these sabotaging patterns, and then the exact process we use to rewrite them so you can start living a better life today. So let's look at some real world examples from 3 women that I've helped coach who came to me stuck in various cycles that they couldn't really break. So let me get my whiteboard going here, and we will walk through some of these stories and how we're able to rewrite them. Now, one thing that I've always noticed when we're trying to catch these limiting love stories is your body is really key. Your body is going to show you things way before your mind registers. So your body will send you warning signals, and it will be like, somebody said something. I'm like, oh, I start to feel not great in my stomach. Right before your brain starts to try to be like, oh, but like, maybe he's busy, or, oh, actually he hates you. And that sick feeling in your stomach, that tight chest, that voice saying, oh, don't get your hopes up. Oh, all men are like this. These are clues to your nervous system that is trying to protect you. And here's what's happening. Oftentimes, we'll override these signals with stories that end up keeping us stuck. And these stories could have come about from our childhood. They could have come about from when people made fun of us in high school. It could have come about from a bunch of different scenarios. Ultimately, our brain, our inner process, they're not trying to sabotage us. They're actually trying to help us by protecting us. All our body wants to not be hurt. But a lot of these stories end up hurting us in the long term. So one client came to me and she said, I kept attracting unavailable men. And I asked her about her last situation. She said he'd text her at 2 a.m. asking to hang out. Her stomach would get tight, but he's like, well, at least he's reaching out to me. But after that happened, he'd pull back and she'd spend the whole next day analyzing why he texted her late at night. Maybe this has happened to you before. So her body was screaming, this feels bad, this feels icky, but her brain was making excuses. And that's when we start to see your automatic responses, is when you feel that uncomfortable feeling, you automatically do something to make it go away. And the most common responses I see when people get these, feelings, they start shrinking, they become super agreeable, or they start to perform, they start over explaining themselves, or they try to disappear and like shut off completely. They go absolute ghost on themselves. Let's talk about one other example. And I was talking to one of the clients and she was dealing with a very toxic, like narcissistic ex. And I was like, okay, well, why don't you just block him? And she's like, oh, I don't want to be mean. I'm not the kind of person that blocks people. And this was after this guy had just repeatedly just texted her at 2 a.m. Anytime she would bring up any of her concerns, he would just completely dismiss them. And her automatic response was, hey, I'm just going to be super accommodating of bad behavior, because her brain had learned, if I'm understanding and flexible, people won't leave me. But oftentimes we're being understanding and flexible to the wrong type of person. So let's talk about the pattern here. The gut feeling saying something, our brain creates a story, it tries to explain it away, and then our automatic response is to try to avoid that level of pain, that level of discomfort, and we end up staying in the bad situation. So it'd be like, we got our gut here, we got like the gut, the body, and then we've got the, brain creating a story being like, oh no, it's actually fine. And then we're end up being stuck, right? So let's talk a little bit about how we can use these warning signs that our body's giving us, and we can start being like, there's an issue here. So let's go into the hidden agreements that are oftentimes hurting our love life. So every automatic response is protecting an old agreement or an old story that we've built up to protect ourselves. And this is how we stay safe in relationships. And those agreements, they might have worked once. They might have worked because, your mom was overbearing and you had to be small to protect yourself. It might have been because you never wanted to outshine one of your siblings for retribution. There's so many different hidden agreements that we have that we need to start to unpack. So let's talk about some of the hidden agreements that some of these women were struggling with. If I don't have standards, I can't be abandoned for having standards. So instead of having strong boundaries, she was removing all boundaries so that she would not be abandoned. And that likely comes from her childhood. And if I'm needed, I won't be abandoned. This was another woman who was tending to be in the mothering role. She would always date younger guys, and she would feel like she was a mother to him, but then she would feel like, this guy, like I feel like I constantly have to baby him. But that was like her trying to make up for a caretaker role that she didn't have when she was a kid. So all of these different love stories that we identify, and we can go back and we can pick them out and be like, well, why did I act like that in that situation? At what point in my past was I taught that this is the proper response? So, as another example, one of the clients said, oh, good guys are so scarce in Dubai. So her mind was managing expectations. She said, oh, if I meet a good guy, like, oh, it's so hard in Dubai. And the hidden agreements, if I don't expect much, I won't get hurt. Or another thing it was teaching her mind was, oh, there aren't good guys here. So any little pullback, any little bit of behavior that she didn't like, she would automatically, oh, there's no good guys in Dubai. But this story was influencing her to not only settle for less, but to potentially miss connections with quality guys because everything she interpreted through that lens. So if you watch my other videos, you guys are familiar with the reticular activating system. And this is essentially the part of the brain that will scan your world. So let's say your friend recently buys like an Audi or a nice, German car. Suddenly you start seeing that car every single place. It's not like God just started dropping new cars out of the sky, right? That are just that specific brand. Is your mind is trained to confirm what you already believe. And this is the reason these limiting love stories are so detrimental is we have them in our mind. All guys are trash. There are no good men in Dubai. And then we start to look for those. Our brain actively looks for the information to confirm those. And just like the car example, it's not like new cars just got made the second your friend bought one. We are actively looking for those things. So if we're looking for things to confirm our beliefs and their beliefs are negative, then we're going to find them. So let's break apart one of these stories. So let's take the good guys are scarce in Dubai and the evidence that it's realistic. Sometimes there is good evidence that it's realistic because our brain didn't form these stories for no reason. So, some dating experiences in Dubai, I'm sure were very disappointing, but the evidence that it's outdating. Maybe a bunch of her friends actually found guys that were really great in Dubai. And she's even actively noticing stuff that will confirm those beliefs. So we have to overwrite it with things. We can say, okay, why did I come up with that belief? Maybe I went on a few bad dates, or maybe I heard some stories about bad dates. Is there anything I can use to counteract that? Because ultimately, if we believe and we're committed to living in this particular region and we're saying, oh, there's no good guys here, you either want to do long distance or you have to actively be like, there are good guys here. I'm just not looking in the right places. There are good guys here, and search to find the evidence that would confirm that belief because it's a more helpful belief. Or let's take the example of the woman who was afraid to cut people off. Let's talk about why that might have been a realistic scenario, why that story was created. She values being understanding. She values being flexible, somebody that can kind of roll with uncomfortable situations. Maybe that was valuable in her work. Maybe it was valuable in her childhood. Maybe it was valuable in high school. But the evidence that this is outdated is, but protecting my peace doesn't make me a bad person. Healthy adults respect boundaries, and I should have boundaries as a healthy adult. And then we start to count the cost of what are those limiting stories, those stories that we built up, what are they actually costing us? Because when we put them down in paper, then we will understand. As an example, let's say you really want to get into entrepreneurship, but you're afraid of the cost of getting into it. You can literally physically write out those costs. What is it costing you to say goodbye to the wrong guys quickly? What is it costing you to block your ex so that you don't reach out to them again? And after you've gone through the exhaustive list of everything that is costing you to not have done those things, then we'll see those and we'll be like, oh, dang, I got to rewrite this story. So, and now let's get into rewriting the stories because you can't just delete old patterns. You actually have to replace them and bridge them with something that is more true based on all of the evidence that we've just collected. So instead of, I'm not the type of person who cuts people off, try, I protect my peace and I'm still a good person. Instead of good guys are scarce, I notice the good qualities in people around me. Instead of, I help people grow up because I care, I choose partners who value my companionship and not just my caretaking. And these aren't huge leaps from I'm unlovable to I'm like the most resistible magnetic woman in the world, but they're small shifts that incrementally increase your magnetism and incrementally improve not just your love life, your entire life. And change happens through these small, consistent actions. So today, I want you to have this experiment. You can do it today or you can do it this week, but use a 5-second pause. When you feel yourself getting tight or you feel like you're being triggered in this scenario, be like, okay, why am I being triggered? And you do not have to respond to the person that's triggering you and me and say, oh, let me think of that. And come back later, identify the love story that is being played on in your mind and being like, okay, well, why did I get so triggered here? Go back, find out what's likely the issue, rewrite it, write down the pattern, and you say, okay, well, what would somebody who now believes my new belief, not the limiting love story, what would somebody that already believes what I want them to believe, how would they act differently? And if you like this training, I have a full breakdown in my community where we talk all about mindset, dating, and relationships and how to find you the love you deserve. I love you. Ciao.